Have you ever wondered what those ugly silver fillings are on people's teeth? Before I started dental school and I learned about amalgams or silver fillings, I thought those silver fillings on people's teeth were actually cavities. Normally you don't see them because typically they're in the back of the mouth and not in aesthetic areas, but you would still see them if someone's laughing or yawning and it just looks like they've been eating Oreos for a while. Hey guys, my name is Amanpreet Singh and welcome back to Dental Secrets. Today we're going to be talking about what those silver fillings are in your mouth and what they're made out of and if they're safe and other alternatives to those silver fillings. But before we get started with the video, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel below. Let's get into it. Turns out those silver things in people's mouths are not cavities. They're actually amalgam silver fillings. Most people don't use amalgams anymore, but they were pretty common back in the day. So what exactly are those amalgam fillings and why don't we use them as much today? One of the biggest concerns people have with an amalgam or a silver filling is mercury. The fact is, amalgams do increase mercury levels in the body, and there's studies showing that, and you can see it being excreted in people's urine, blood, or even their feces. So what exactly is mercury? Mercury is a toxic metal, and it comes in many different forms in our environment. The reason people are scared of mercury is mercury toxicity. Too much mercury can have lots of harmful effects on your body, including damaging your nervous system, your immune system, your lungs, your kidneys, and all your other organs in your body, and it could even lead to death. So why the heck did people put these mercury fillings in your mouth if they can cause all these negative effects? Well, there's a few things to look at. There's the actual form of mercury that's being put in your mouth, the concentration of it, and how much of it actually accumulates in your body. Like we said before, mercury can have many different forms, and when you're getting an amalgam or a silver filling, mercury is released as a vapor. And as a vapor, mercury is a colorless, odorless gas. Now when you're looking at mercury as a vapor, you want to look at the threshold limit value. This is the level that someone can be exposed to without any adverse effects, and the level for mercury is about 5 parts per billion. Now there's 3 different elemental forms of mercury. There's elemental mercury, inorganic mercury, and organic mercury. Elemental and inorganic mercury mainly get absorbed through your lungs, and organic mercury mainly gets absorbed through your GI tract. Dental amalgams fall under elemental mercury, and as you said before, they're released as a vapor. Now here's a diagram showing the mercury release from amalgams. And this graph actually shows the mercury release from just a few amalgam fillings and many amalgam fillings. And you can also see the difference in release whether you're chewing or not chewing. And you can imagine that if you're chewing on many amalgam fillings, you're probably going to have more mercury release. You're constantly hitting those amalgams and constantly releasing a little bit more mercury. And what this graph also shows is when you would start to see health effects. And you can see that even with many amalgam fillings and constantly chewing on it, you're nowhere near having any subtle or even minor health effects. But this also begs another question. How else are we exposed to mercury? Where else are we getting mercury in our body? Well, there's mercury in our air supply, our water supply, our food, and of course, our dental and medical sources. Through the air, a big one is mercury mines, and I know mining mercury doesn't really happen that much anymore, but it does happen in some countries. And another big supply of mercury is in our food, and a big one is tuna fish and other fish as well. Now what you want to look at is how does a mercury release from these amalgam fillings compare to day-to-day living, and the mercury we're exposed to just living. Let's say you get a ton of amalgam fillings. This graph is actually showing you get 18 occlusal or biting surface amalgam fillings. Just from getting these 18 silver fillings, you're exposed to about 20 micrograms of mercury a day. But just in a single day, we're exposed to about 110 micrograms of mercury from all the other stuff in our environment. And another thing to look at is the bioaccumulation of mercury, or how much of it actually stays in your organs versus actually getting excreted by your body. Most of the mercury we intake is actually eliminated through urine, feces, or even exfoliated through our skin or our hair. And the average half-life of mercury in the human body is about 55 days. Basically, the amount of mercury that's staying in your body is pretty negligible. So if a dentist tells you that they want to get rid of your amalgam fillings because there's mercury in them and they're not safe, I would probably run away. That person is definitely BSing you. And while you're running, I would make sure you didn't steal your wallet while you're at it. Hey, where's my wallet? Mercury alone is not a good reason to replace amalgam fillings. You would actually be exposed to more mercury as a dentist is drilling out those amalgams. But there are times where I would replace an amalgam filling with either a composite or even doing a crown. One reason for this is amalgams tend to expand over time. And if you look at teeth that have larger amalgam fillings, I've seen this in a lot of patients where you start to see crack lines or fracture lines starting to form on those teeth. And some people would try to be conservative and just watch this over time and hope that that tooth doesn't break on you. But I've seen too many times where people come in shooting pain and half their tooth is broken off because they had this big amalgam filling and they never got it taken care of before it caused that fracture. So what I started doing is when I see a crack starting to form on a tooth and they have a larger amalgam filling in there, I like to take action before it gets any worse. So if it's a smaller amalgam filling, if it's just one surface and I see one small crack forming on just one side of the tooth, I probably wouldn't do a crown. I could probably get away with just doing a filling. But if it's any bigger and it's multiple surfaces, that's when I would recommend doing a crown to protect the rest of the tooth. And this is especially important in those patients that are grinding or clenching or just have a really heavy bite and are more prone to fracture their teeth. And this is also part of the reason why amalgams aren't really being used anymore and why they're basically being phased out of dentistry. And there's a couple other reasons why people, including me, do not like doing amalgams anymore. One is they're plain ugly. I mean, who wants to have a silver filling on their tooth when you could just get a tooth-colored composite that doesn't look like you've been eating Oreos all the time or have food stuck in your teeth all the time? I've heard too many dentists, and even in dental school I heard this a lot, where people say, I place the most beautiful amalgam filling. And I look at them and I say, is it really beautiful? I mean, it may be beautiful to you because the contours are perfect, the anatomy looks really cool, it looks just like a tooth. The only problem is it's freaking silver. It's not the color of your tooth. So no matter how pretty you make it look, it's never going to look like a real tooth. Another reason I don't like using them is you have to reduce more tooth structure in order to place them. And the reason is amalgams rely on mechanical retention to stay in your tooth, whereas modern day composites are actually bonded to your tooth. So the difference is if you're doing a composite, you can remove a little bit of tooth structure, put the bonding agent, and basically glue that composite to the tooth. Whereas when you're doing an amalgam, there's no bonding or gluing process. What you're doing is you're creating your preparation in a way so that the amalgam is locked in. So let's say we're drilling into a tooth and we try to make it parallel walls. Well, that won't be ideal for an amalgam because it can just fall out. So what you would do with an amalgam is you would kind of make an undercut so that the amalgam is kind of locked in to that preparation. And another thing you can do when you're drilling on that tooth is you can create some grooves in that preparation so that that amalgam is basically locked in and not going to fall out. But like we said, that's all removing additional tooth structure that's not really necessary with our modern day composites. But that being said, why did people place amalgams back in the day and why do some people still place them now? Well, amalgam still does have its uses. One of the biggest ones is when it's a moist environment and you cannot get good isolation. So let's say you're working in the back of the mouth, this patient has a ton of saliva, and it's just really hard to keep that area dry. Well, our composites or our tooth color fillings that we use nowadays have to have a dry environment on that tooth in order to work. And you can imagine how that's hard. You're basically working in a cave that has saliva everywhere and you have this giant tongue that no matter what you do, it's going to fight you. An amalgam can be used in these moist environments and work pretty well. But that being said, there are ways around this when you're doing a composite. There's a rubber dam isolation, which is basically isolating that tooth from the rest of your mouth. Or you can use a bunch of cotton rolls and gauze and get good isolation that way. And there's also other alternatives. If you can't get good isolation for a composite, you can also use something called glass ionomer, which is a great alternative to amalgam. So that's pretty much everything I had to say in this video. Bottom line is, are amalgams safe? Yes, they are safe, but I totally understand why you wouldn't want to have something that releases mercury in your mouth. The less you have in your body, the better, right? But amalgams are pretty ugly, and I do think we have better things out there now that work just as well and look a lot more aesthetic. And if your dentist does still place amalgams, I wouldn't think it's a big deal. It's nothing to freak out about. They still work. I would probably request a composite filling instead though. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked that video. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel below, and we'll see you in the next video.